Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you had a chance to grab something to eat. Welcome to the CJC's first event of the semester. Very grateful to see everybody, and also to our guests, who I'll introduce in a second. Just to say that we have a number of events, including later this week and next week planned, but please look at the CJC's website, Center for Jewish Civilization, and the schedule will be there. And if you're interested in signing up on our mailing list to be to make sure that you receive all of the information about all of our events and all of the happenings related to the CJC, please do sign up or see Sammy. Thank you, Sammy. Thank you so much. Sammy Feldbaum, who is our events manager as well. So thank you for that. And also just wanted to say, before I introduce our speakers, just thanks to Heart of the Nation, to Jonathan Kessler in particular, for helping put this event together. So today we are improvising. This wasn't what we planned. We had hoped to host our two speakers in person, but I think I'll let our speakers explain a little bit about why. I think a lot of you know recent changes, particularly in U.S. policy regarding granting visas for Palestinians, that has impacted us. But of course, much more directly, one of our guests. But let me start with Shira, who's in the room. Shira Efron is a good friend and a good friend of the Center for Jewish Civilization at Georgetown. She has rejoined recently the RAND Corporation. She is the Israel Policy Chair, the Distinguished Israel Policy Chair at RAND. She was formerly Director of Research at the Israel Policy Forum, has worked on a variety of issues, including climate, and also as a consultant for the UN country team in Palestine when I was there. So we have a long-standing relationship on a lot of these issues. And joining us by Zoom, fortunately, we're grateful to Samer for his time, but unfortunately by Zoom, we have Samer Sinijlawi, who is a Palestinian political activist. He is the founder of the Jerusalem Development Fund. He has been, I encourage all of you to read his writings, in particular an article that he published just last year in The Atlantic, which sort of outlines his vision for peace between Israelis and Palestinians. And he is also working behind the scenes on a number of initiatives, including with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and former Palestinian Foreign Minister Nasser al-Kidwa. So Samer, very grateful for you to at least honor the commitment and spend time with us. I'm just sorry that you couldn't be here, but maybe I think that's a good way to start. And normally we would we would start here, but I think perhaps Samer, as we discussed, I think it's important for people here and at the at Georgetown and our students and guests here to understand maybe better why you weren't able to come to the United States. Maybe you could let us understand a little bit about the implications of the changes, recent changes in U.S. policy and their sort of real-time implications on the ground. Please, Samer.
Well, good morning, good afternoon. First, I would like to start by thanking Dr. Jonathan and all the team of the Center for Jewish Civilization in Georgetown University for organizing this event and inviting me and Shira. I also have a long-standing friendship with Shira. We are invited a lot to similar events, either here in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, or sometimes abroad. Well, I really wish and hope to be able to be in person in the room today with you, but unfortunately, there was recently a blank freeze for Palestinian visas to USA. Mainly, it's a policy that was initiated and implemented by Ambassador Hakapi, who felt that this could be some kind of a reaction to the new wave of international recognition to the Palestinian state. And I fall in that category, although I have nothing to do with the PA. I'm a voice of opposition to the PA, and I'm not part of the next conference in New York that is related to this recognition to the Palestinian state. But there was nothing that we could do. We've tried a lot of channels to try to have an exception, but it didn't work, unfortunately. And I missed this opportunity and other opportunities that I was planning to have in Washington, D.C. But I would be always looking forward to coming events to come and visit in person Georgetown University. It's a prestigious institutions that I would really love to come and visit. Anyhow, I guess I'll start my own presentation. So what's the time that you are giving both me and Shira, Jonathan? I mean,
so you know, I think maybe we could just keep this as a sort of conversation format, but I'd love to give you the opportunity to go first and give us a sense of what's happening. Of course, you know, just this morning we heard news of an attack in Jerusalem. Of course, the war is ongoing. There is constant talk of potential ceasefire proposal in the works, but we're living through a really violent and horrific time. I think for both Israelis and certainly for Palestinians in Gaza. So, you know, maybe just with that framing, Samer, I'd be happy to hear you, you know, give us a sense of what you're working on, and how in this environment you actually can frame the idea of a peaceful shared future with Israelis. Samer.
Okay. I'll give a little bit background on my you know, bios or involvement in politics. I started politics at early age of 14. I was a kid in Jerusalem that started throwing stones in the first Intifada, first uprising, 1987 to that continued until 1993. And this got me into 5 years in Israeli jail. I was 15 years old. I went out at the age of 20 when the peace process started. And I was always a mainstream Fatah activist. I was elected to be the head of the youth organization for Fatah. I was then in charge of the international Israeli relation for the Fatah Supreme Committee. And from day one, I started a journey of dialogue with Israelis. It started me and the guards in the prison, and then I continued with the labor youth, Likud youth, and then I continued talking to Israelis. I am now meeting an average of 200 Israelis a week in small groups, individuals, and conferences. I talk to every Israeli that accepts to talk to me. And I joke sometimes with my Israeli friends and I tell them, I know you better than you know yourselves because I talk to all of you, you don't talk to each other. And I learned something from this long journey of dialogue. Of course, I know my people very well because I am a political activist, I am mainstream, I am in Fatah. I talk to all the people who call the shots now, even though I became a voice of the opposition inside Fatah, but I still represent the majority because in our case, opposition does not mean minority. In our case, in the Palestinian case, the majority, the opposition is the majority because 90% of the Palestinian people in every single poll that was conducted in the last 15 years is asking the current president Abbas to resign and leave the political life. He's not responding, of course. So the majority of Palestinians are looking for a change. On the Palestinian side, so I would like to reflect my understanding to this conflict, both in the eyes of Palestinians and in the eyes of Israelis. And I think unless we both start seeing this conflict from the eyes of the other side, we will not be able to understand this conflict. And we will keep thinking wrong in this conflict, and we'll keep finding long paths to exit this conflict. When we start seeing this conflict from the eyes of the others, we start understanding it. And for me, this conflict is only two words. From the Israeli side, it's one word: security. From the Palestinian side, it's one word: human dignity and freedom. And although it might seem to most of the experts in the Middle East or in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, they might tell you this is a very complicated conflict. Let me tell you with a lot of confidence, because I know very well the Palestinians, I know very well the Israelis. This is a very naive and silly conflict. But we are not able to understand it. Or I can say more accurate, we are under leadership, political elite on both sides that does not have a political will to exit this conflict. That it became in their best interest to keep this conflict, to try to manage it, to try to keep it going. It applies on President Abbas. He is now in the age of 90 years old. He was elected 20 years ago for a term of 4 years, but continued to self-employ himself until today. He harassed all the possibilities for building up our institutions, statehood institutions, democratic, transparent, accountable institutions. He harassed Fatah, destroyed it, turned it into an arm that is linked to the security apparatus in the PA. And he does not do anything to try to reunify the Palestinians. There is a split in the Palestinian politics. Hamas controlled Gaza since 2007, and Abbas stayed controlling the West Bank. Currently, the majority of Palestinians are fed up from the destruction that Hamas brought upon them in Gaza, and they are fed up from the corruption that Abbas brought upon them in the West Bank. Most of the Palestinians are looking forward a third way of leadership, a leadership that can bring hope, can replace construction and destruction and corruption by a third way of construction. And they are looking forward to have this change. Currently, the support of Hamas in Gaza is almost zero outside the framework of their members and their direct involved military soldiers. So maybe there is 50,000 Gazans that are supporting Hamas out of 2.1 million. Currently, the population of Gaza decreased from 2.4 to 2.1 million, or almost 2 million people. The brand of terrorism that Hamas represents is totally unacceptable now in Gaza. There is still some kind of support to Hamas in the West Bank. The more you go further from the war center, the more people start acting in a different way. So when you come to the Palestinian diaspora, for example, in USA, you start seeing that they are, supporting the slogan of "from the river to the sea," which is it sounds like coming from a la-la land. It totally does not reflect the reality. The majority of the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Jerusalem and in Gaza are supporting the two-state solution. They are supporting a way to be able to exit this conflict towards separation. But unfortunately, they are a little bit confused. Most of the Palestinians have been kidnapped as hostages in the bunkers of Abbas for the last 20 years. Abbas and Hamas, depends if you live in the West Bank and Gaza. And they did not have tools to participate in the political life, to express their opinions, to exchange ideas, to take part in the political life. On the Israeli side, I believe also the main challenge that is facing us as Palestinians is the lack of security. the fear inside the hearts of the Israelis. If I would like to identify the enemy of the Palestinians, it's the fear inside the hearts of the Israelis. And we need to be able to build up a strategy that will be able to defeat that fear. If we are able to overcome the hard feelings that the Israelis have, actually, both Israelis and Palestinians now, they have their hearts filled with cocktail of feelings, including pain, including hatred. We should not deny that the majority of Palestinians and Israelis do have some kind of hatred to the other side. And this is the real challenge. There is no complication into trying to find a model or a scenario of solving the hard issue of the conflict, like Jerusalem, the borders, settlements, and refugees. If we are able to defeat these hard feelings, we will be able to find a way of bringing a scenario that will have the majority of Israelis and Palestinians accept and support. Jonathan mentioned one of the initiatives that I am involved in. It's the initiatives between the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and the former Palestinian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Nasser al-Qudwa. It took me 6 months to convince Dr. Nasser al-Qudwa to meet Olmert virtually on Zoom. He hesitated very much. It was the beginning of the war. The footage coming from Gaza were very hard. And it was very difficult for a high-profile Palestinian politician to meet a former Israeli prime minister. So 6 months of hard work until he said, yes, I'll meet him. When they both met, it took them 4 Zoom meetings of 4 hours and 13 days to sign a joint proposal that has almost a comprehensive solution of how to end the war in Gaza and how to reach to a 2-state solution. So the main obstacle is the hard feelings. Once you overcome these hard feelings, people will be able to think relaxed in a way of putting an end to this conflict. But it needs that we start changing the way we are thinking in this conflict, and it needs also that we change leadership. And I would like to say something about what should we do as Palestinians. And I think we, the Palestinians, have more obligation to start this change. And if one side starts this change, it will have impact on the other side. Why do we Palestinians have more obligation to start this change before the Israelis and then impact them to start their change? Because I think we have a more sense of urgency in trying to exit this conflict. At the time that we, both Israelis and Palestinians, pay very heavy price of this conflict, yet the Israelis, they have a strong country. They have an OECD country, strong economy. They are a startup nation. They have a strong army. They have a passport that connects them to 160 countries all over the world without needing a visa. We don't have all of this. We have 2 million Palestinians in Gaza that are living under plastic tents. So we have a certain sense of urgency more than them. They can wait another 80 years in this conflict. We cannot wait another 80 hours in this conflict. So we must start the change. If we need to succeed in finding a way out of this conflict, we need to start realizing that it is useless to continue using a strategy that is based on pressuring the Israelis. Currently, the Palestinian strategy is based on using pressure on the Israelis on ground by using violence, and internationally by trying to mobilize diplomatically the world against Israel. Unfortunately, this strategy is a broken strategy. It didn't work for the last 80 years. The Israelis get stubborn when you try to pressure them. The only way to try to move the Israelis towards peace is by trying to persuade them. We as Palestinians, we need to touch their hearts and their minds. I always say that we are one Israeli elections away from peace. If in the coming elections we were able to convince 51% of the Israelis to vote in a direction of exiting this conflict through political means, we can exit this conflict. If we fail to convince 51% of the Israelis to do so, we will never exit this conflict.
So Samer, maybe I could stop you there, because I think that that's a really good segue. Perhaps maybe to turn to Shira, and then we'll get a chance to go back to you in a minute. But maybe we could ask. I mean, what is the internal political scene like in Israel today? I mean, we talked about pressure. I mean, is there an understanding inside Israel of this sort of the growing isolation? Are people feeling it? The sense of the reaction of the international community to the images from Gaza, to the humanitarian situation, the declaration of famine. I mean, it's deteriorated so dramatically that the discourse here, I think, talked a little bit about the United States and maybe within different communities, but I think globally has changed so dramatically over the past 2 years. How do you see all of that in terms of the reaction in Israel, and then how it might impact the situation on the ground in terms of the internal politics?
So, hi everyone. Lots of questions from John, and lots to respond to what Samer said. But I hope you all can hear me. I just landed, and I work more on the technical, functional issues. Actually, Israeli politics is the topic I hate the most, but I'll try to address it the best that I can. I will just say that I really wish Samer was here, and the moment it was clear, a lot of people were trying to help solve this issue, and I wrote him just a personal note that I know that he will persevere, and I do believe in that. So your voice will continue to be heard in Israel and abroad, Samer. And I'm here to channel everything you say and think. I do think, though, that we can talk about the recognition of a Palestinian state by certain countries, and frankly, I'm not sure this is the right strategy if you want to bring an actual Palestinian state to the Palestinian people, not a notional one. I understand the frustration with Israel and why they're going this course, but in the context of what Samer is going through, there is a U.S. response to this measure, which frankly I think is incoherent and inconsistent with what the United States supposedly wants to do, right? So this is almost a childish, amateurish ban on visas to Palestinian officials, and including all Palestinians, including people like Samer, that frankly the U.S. should bring him if they want to punish all the but this is like an attempt to put a lead on Palestinian nationalism. Okay, and we've seen this before. It's not for the first time, right? This visa story, this idea that there's, we're just going to push the Palestinians, we're going to block them in, and these voices are not going to come out. And if we are talking about in the U.S., and I think it is important to speak about with the U.S., that it's hard to have a sense of, be careful with my words, I work for him, a coherence coming from this town, right, when it comes to the Middle East and on these Palestinians. But if we are looking at the attempts to reach a ceasefire and statements by Ambassador Huckabee about the dangers of collapse of the Palestinian Authority, which he's saying. So if these are things that are concerning the United States, or if you understand that involvement of the Palestinian Authority is going to help you solve the situation in Gaza, and it will, despite what Israel says, some Palestinian Authority involved will be. So why undermine the Palestinians? And this idea of coercion through ignoring and sanctioning the Palestinians instead of through engagement, to me, just doesn't make sense from a U.S. perspective. So just this on Samer. I think on Israel, I agree with you, Samer, that this is the core of the issue, right? For Israelis, certainly it's security. But I think there's something that happened throughout these years, and we have to be honest. We were not close to a Palestinian state on October 6th, and we're definitely not closer today. for a long time, when there was no security or imminent security threat from Palestinian sides, Israelis didn't see any incentive to deviate from current policies, right? When everything is fine, why rock the boat? Why take any risks? And this idea that and if you look at Israelis today, there is a big confusion on whether the Palestinian issue is it a foreign policy issue or is it a domestic issue? Because the fact is that you have today, and these are just numbers. We don't have to evacuate so many, but you have hundreds of thousands of Israelis that live in what is designed as occupied land, an area that's supposed to be part of the Palestinian state. I mean, many of them will remain in areas that will be left in Israel, right? But those numbers are growing. And if you look at who's serving in the IDF today and who are the leading commanders, not the chief of staff, but these are people that are coming from these communities. And they're also in the police, and it has become something that's so it's a big part of the domestic Israeli consideration. If you look at Bezalel Smotrich, who is the minister in the defense ministry and the minister of finance today, he has no public support, but he treats the West Bank as if it's Israel proper. I mean, this is the fact. He changed some structures. And I have to tell you something, because this is where we're talking about, Summer is talking about lack of Palestinian leadership. Israel may have had a leadership, but Israelis have not decided what they want to do about their neighbors, the Palestinians. You know this. There's no decision. Are we living with them? Are we separating in a constructive way? What are we doing? Smotrich, I'll give him the credit that at least he put black on white a few years ago. His plan, what he wants to happen, it's not a nice plan. It's not a plan that's good for the Palestinians, and I don't think it's good for Israelis either. But at least he put it back on white. He has a strategy. He works through the bureaucracy, and he achieves the policy. And for people like Smotrich, October 7, and they say it's a miracle because it helps them enlist the Israeli support and the Israeli fear to fulfill their vision. And he has a vision. If you ask Yair Lapid, Benny Gantz, Gadi Eisenkot, they are terrified of saying something about a different future for the Palestinians, let alone Naftali Bennett, which we'll get to him in a second, because you asked about politics. It's not like you have Netanyahu and Smotrich in this government that are taking us down one path, and hopefully, right, Israel will have a different government in the next election, which we're probably going to be some point in the next 12 months, summer. But it's not like if you have Naftali Bennett as the prime minister now, Palestinians are going to obtain their independence and dignity, because this is where the hard work begins, right? How do you enlist the support of Israelis for, I know it sounds, in English it doesn't work as well, but some sort of a constructive partition, constructive separation of the two people. Because when you tell Israelis to Palestinian state now, they can't fathom how is this even related to reality, right? Say, first of all, it's perceived as a reward for terrorism, for the October 7 massacre. I don't think so. I don't think that's what Hamas wanted. Hamas didn't want a Palestinian state, right? On 22% of mandatory Palestine, they want something else. They really want from the river to the sea, right? Hamas, they want it a different way. And there's some parts of the Israeli society that want that too. It's a minority on both sides. But how do you just in terms of the next government, how do you convince them to go along a way that is, constructive, lifting the Israeli control, different measures of control of Palestinian lives and separating and seeing the Palestinians with dignity? And I can tell you, as someone who's worked on humanitarian issues but now lives in Israel, and the images from Gaza are horrifying, right? I mean, you all see them, but Israelis don't see them because there's self-censorship in the Israeli media. They just don't see them because the Israelis don't want to see them. They don't want to see those pictures, so they don't understand. And when I look at those pictures, when you see, even when I see really terrible images, right, from Ukraine and Russia, but you see at least two sides like fighting. This loss of dignity that we're seeing in Gaza, it's something that I think is going to haunt the Israelis for generations, because eventually these are going to be our neighbors, right? They're not going anywhere, despite what some people missed out. Think of Riviera and massive voluntary evacuation. So I think if you look at sort of where Israel is, until Israelis understand sort of what they want to do with the Palestinians, that this idea of managing the conflict is not going to address this issue. The blind spot on Palestinian nationalism, that, Samar is in opposition to the Palestinian government, but he still wants a Palestinian entity, right? Samar, you want independence. You want that. It's all Palestinians want that, whether they like Abu Mazen or don't like Abu Mazen. And Israelis are like, oh, well, they'll be able to go to the beach. They'll be fine. Just give them a job. They'll be fine. Some people want more than that. Maybe they want a job, but they also want something else. This right for self-recognition that Palestinians want. And I just don't see the Israeli political system there, where we are seeing, and maybe this is where there is some silver lining. The most part you see now is that most of the Israelis do not support this government, which is why we didn't have elections until now, right? Because this government knows they're never going to be reelected in this form again. There's no support for this government. There's no support for their policies. This intensifying campaign in Gaza, it has no support of the Israeli public, and it has no support of the IDF. So think about it, you have the Israeli generals, the military folks, right, that all they supposedly want to do is go and fight. They're saying, no, we don't want to fight. This is a death trap. We're going to kill the Israeli hostages, still remaining 20 are believed to be alive. We're going to a lot of IDF soldiers are going to die, and many, many, many more civilian Palestinians are going to die. And for what? So we're going to come to this strategic fork in the road again to decide what we need to decide. What do we do with Gaza? And so, I mean, we can talk about this for hours and how it happened and the whole evolution of this and the divide between Gaza and the West Bank, which frankly was also something that Israel maybe didn't start, but Israel supported actively. Jonathan knows that. You probably saw the suitcases. Didn't drive themselves with the dollars, from the airport. So anyway, where at this moment most of the Israelis support a ceasefire deal. Hopefully, something can be delivered from here, and then if there is a ceasefire deal, and Israel's going to be forced to speak about sort of a durable arrangement in Gaza the day after the war. And this will bring some level of Palestinian Authority involvement into Gaza, which then will be also conditioned on these reforms that everyone is telling them they have to do. And there's some lip service on reforms, right? Summer can speak about it a little bit more. If we're going to see at the end of this month unilateral recognition of several countries in a Palestinian state, which, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but over, I think, 150 countries already recognize the state of Palestine, maybe a few more. Only 165 recognize Israel. I don't think it brought the Palestinians closer to a Palestinian state than, right? Without it, this is not the idea. The hard work remains. It's the actual capacity building. It's building a state. It's the leadership changes that are needed. It's for Israel to come to terms with what it wants. So I think the words are simple, but actually the hard work, we have a lot of hard work for both of us on both sides and for the international community, because I don't think anything, and this is really unfortunate, any voluntary initiatives that are constructive are going to come from either side.
Well, thanks for that. A lot of questions that I have, in particular about the likelihood of a ceasefire moving forward, but maybe if we get a chance to go into that, but maybe before we go to our audience and give them an opportunity to ask some questions of both of maybe Samer, you can give us a sense. I think one of the aspects of the current issues that we tend to miss in terms of the coverage of the war in Gaza in particular is the situation in the West Bank and maybe the role of the PA. I mean, what is the PA doing right now? In terms of its governance, in terms of its engagement on the ground. And also, we just saw this morning, for those who are following the news on a 24/7 basis, a terrorist attack in Jerusalem this morning. 6 Israelis were killed. What is the nature of this violence and something that we hear about as well about the settler violence as well. What maybe you could give us a sense of what's happening on the West Bank and what some of the Palestinian responses have been.
Well, I'll start by telling you that yesterday I have a drive from Jerusalem to Jericho. It's a 32 minutes drive. I noticed during these 32 minutes drives, 9 newly established illegal posts, settler posts. These are type of caravans that they bring and put up at a certain place on a hill, and they just try to start and enforce a new settlement. So in 32 minutes drive, 9 new illegal posts were there. So you can imagine the project of Smotrich in the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years, less than 3 years of his term as Minister of Finance and a minister in the Ministry of Defense in charge of the West Bank. He took control of the civil administration almost. He changed the rules of the game completely. Now he is the sovereign. It's not the central commander anymore. He's the sovereign. He can decide whatever he wants. He has the financial resources and he has the bureaucracy that he controls. And he acts silently. Confiscation of land, building new settlements, trying to demolish as much as possible houses in Area B, sometimes in Area C if they can. And the level of violence that is increasing, which is in a way or another has the support and endorsement of the state of Israel, because on the other hand, Ben Gvir, who controls the police, the Israeli police, who is the law enforcement in charge on following any disturbance of law by the Israelis, the settlers in the West Bank, and the police under Ben Gvir is giving a blind eye. They are not interfering. An Israeli settler has been documented in video killing a Palestinian, and he was arrested for less than 3 days and was released. And his crime was documented in video. So in a way or another, it's a big chaos. It is a disaster. There are around 1,200 checkpoints in the West Bank that makes almost any movement of Palestinian very difficult, if not impossible. I drove my daughter 2 days ago from East Jerusalem to a small neighborhood north of Ramallah. It's around 13 to 14 kilometers, 10 miles, less than 10 miles away. She wanted to buy something from a mall there. It took us 6 hours to go and come, crossing so many checkpoints, including one checkpoint near Jabba. I think Shira knows very well the location. Because when we were trying to cross that checkpoint, it was the exit of Shabbat. So they put a checkpoint that prevents the Palestinian traffic to reach to the main road, so that the Israeli settlers don't face traffic jams while they are going out of their settlements during the Shabbat, after the Shabbat, toward Jerusalem. Until all the Israeli traffic passed, so between 8 and 11, it was closed for Palestinians, and then it was opened for us. So it's terrible. The level of pressure over Palestinians is really terrible. The PA has lost completely its control. Nothing, nada. They are totally irrelevant. The only job that the PA leadership is working hard to achieve is keeping the regime. There are 150 Palestinians who are the most senior politicians in the PA, the head of the different security agencies, and a group of businessmen who got some kind of monopoly. One businessman, Sabih al-Masri, is controlling 60% of the Palestinian economy. He controls the banking sector, the energy sector, the telecommunication sector, and other sectors. So these group of people are living in a bubble, and they have achieved Palestinian independence 15 years ago. And they want to maintain this. And they don't care about what's happening for the average Palestinians surrounding them. And this brings us to the political theater that always President Abbas tries to create. And one of them is this kind of wave of recognition of the Palestinian state. It's symbolic, it's good, but this cannot be the only Palestinian strategy. If we will reach, Shira said we reached already to 150 states recognizing the state of Palestine. We could reach to 190. If among them Israel is not included, it means nothing for us. The only state that we should try to convince to recognize Palestinian statehood and to adapt to the two-state solution is the state of Israel. Instead of wasting our energy outside trying to mobilize and convince more people, why don't we save this energy to try to convince more Israelis? And I think it's possible. If there will be a Palestinian leadership that takes some decisions, for example, starting by changing the Palestinian narrative, it's time for us as Palestinians to recognize the historical rights of Jews in this land, because it's a historical fact. Nobody should deny that there is a historical link for Jews in this land for 3,500 years. And I don't know why we keep denying it. Denying it shuts down the Israelis. It brings this conflict into a formula of who belongs and who does not belong. Instead of us recognizing this historical right and reminding the Israelis that they have never been alone in this land, that there was always others, and these others are us. So it's not who belongs and who does not belong. The question is, how do we both belong? It changes the dynamics of this conflict. If we start by this step and we declare publicly and seriously and show the Israelis that we are committed to this, putting the Israeli security in the basis of any Palestinian strategy, not to do them a favor, out of Palestinian national interest. These kinds of changes will convince the Israelis that there is a partner on the Palestinian side. We might not convince 100% of the Israelis. It's enough for us to convince 51% of the voters in the coming election. In the coming elections, most probably Bennett will be the prime minister. But Bennett, with a coalition that is mostly formed by center-left parties and around 15 to 18 MKs, Arab MKs, is different than a coalition that he forms from the center and right. If the results of the elections will give him a coalition of center-right, he will be a continuation of Bibi. If the elections will force him into a coalition center-left with the support from Arab MKs, with around 70% of the Knesset that is giving support to his government, he might be the next Israeli Begin. What's the difference between Bennett and Begin? Both of them were greater Israel guys. And Begin has proven again, and Sharon proved this again, that it's leaders that like them that can withdraw from territories as the price of peace. So that's why I believe we should focus into trying to convince Israelis by talking to them. We can have 190 embassies all over the world, but it's meaningless. Canada is a G7 country. It has only 3 embassies in Africa. We, the PA, we have 59 embassies in Africa. How can they help us? If I will be one day the prime minister or the president on the Palestinian side, I will close all these offices and I will open liaison offices in each neighborhood in Israel. In Zichron Yaakov, in Rishon LeZion, in Petah Tikva, in Haifa, in Beersheba, and try to communicate with the Israelis. We need to win their hearts and minds. That's the only way that can bring us to a situation where we have a possibility to achieve peace.
So Samit, thank you. I think Shira has some thoughts about all of this, including Israeli politics and the likelihood and the policies of a potential Bennett government that you discussed. But maybe Shira, I'll give you the word here, and then we'll go to our audience. So please think of questions.
Just very quickly, I think there's and this is also really sad that the Israeli Bennett and his partners now feel like they need to have a coalition that's Jewish majority, supported from the outside by the Arabs. We're talking about Palestinian citizens of Israel that have all equal rights, and the fact that they can't be included now in a coalition of what some are called center left, I think is indicative of the moment, right? Whether those be and definitely I think any coalition would be better than what Israel has now for both domestic and international, what's happening in Gaza. But I mean, I think calling Victor Lieberman and people like that center left is not seeing the picture. And I agree with you, Summer, that it will be a change, and at least we can undo some of the harm that Smotrich done. Some things are irreversible, but I think it will take long process. So if I'm optimistic, I think the next government can at least like stop the deterioration, the downfall, right? And all these negative trends. And maybe it will take more time also on the Palestinian side, right, to convince the Israelis. And that's where the international community comes in, right? And I think when you talk about pressure, it's interesting. To me, it's mind-boggling that you have the French and Germany and Spain and Israel's, we don't have time to go into here, but Israel depends on the Europeans. The economy depends on the Europeans. All academic research depends on the Europeans. The idea of like flights and everything goes through Europe, right? And with that said, with all the European pressure, there has been no effective change in Israeli policy. And then you have the United Arab Emirates say one sentence. I don't know if you saw this. They said the Abraham Accords can be under risk. And Saudi Arabia said this will mean that there won't be any normalization ever. It's not even something that exists. And there's a real because of the threat of annexation, and Israel is like the annexation debate is off the table. At least was off the table that day. Okay, it was removed from the agenda of the government, which I also think is like, it's not that Israelis don't see the pressure. The government sees the pressure. It has real implications for the Israeli GDP, for Israeli academia, for Israelis traveling. You have Israeli, teens going to a water park in Spain and they're not allowed to go in, and these are kids, right? Kids are kids anywhere. They really shouldn't be. And so I think there's like what on the micro level Israelis are feeling and what on the macro levels Israelis are feeling. But clearly if this idea of pressure to change the Israeli government's action, we're not seeing it forced from the outside. Of course, one word from Pennsylvania Avenue here can change a lot of things. This is not where things happen at the moment. So sorry.
I have a lot of questions, but I wanted to give our audience a chance to ask anything. Please, if you could raise your hand and identify yourself. Yeah, please.
Hi, my name is Peter. I'm a student in the MSFS program. If you, hypothetically, I know very hypothetically, but if there was elections in the Palestinian Authority tomorrow, what do you expect would happen?
Yeah, maybe we'll take a couple. That was a quick one, but a profound one too. Yeah, please.
So my name is Sam, by the way. I'm a senior auditor here at Georgetown. I'm old, and the talk of two states has been going on for a long time. Huda Olmert proposed a peace plan that he claimed gave everybody what they wanted decades ago. Facts on the ground are much worse now than they were back then. Demographics are worse. Settlements are worse. Everything is worse. Give us a cause for optimism. What can be done to reverse this and head in the right direction.
Okay, thanks. So maybe we can start there. Should I ask Summer to start with it?
But I think it is important to say, in summary, you can say, you can't trust polling now. I think polling, just as you know, polling without elections, even in functioning democracies, are not really, well, and as we've seen, they're not always indicative of the results also when they were close to elections. But especially I think, in a war zone, in Gaza, and there's a history, and Summer, you can speak about this, when there's polling done, where Palestinian citizens of Israel and outside, they believe it's the Shin Bet, it's the Israeli clandestine service that is calling them to ask them. So, I mean, with this idea that on both sides, for Israelis saying, oh, if we have elections now, Hamas is going to take over, I don't think that's true. And I don't know what the other outcome would be true. What we are seeing consistently across the board, right, Summer, that Abu Mazen is not popular. Not popular at all.
Summer.
Okay, so on the elections in the PA, recently the president of the PA, Mahmoud Abbas, has signed and sent 2 letters, one to President Trump and the second jointly to President Macron and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, MBS. In those 2 letters, he committed, and this comes as part of the wave of recognition of the Palestinian state. And I've heard President Macron personally says that this is one package. Reforms and elections in the PA is part of the package of recognizing the state of Palestine. So Abbas committed to organize presidential and legislative Palestinian elections within 1 year from June 8, when he signed this election. So 9.5 months to go from today. And I think it's very important for the following reason. First of all, the only way to defeat Hamas is by defeating Hamas in election boxes. Continuation of the current war in Gaza will not defeat Hamas. Hamas lost the majority of its military power, its control over Gaza, but we cannot declare their defeat unless we beat them in the coming Palestinian election. Are we able to win these elections? I can tell you definitely Abbas and Hamas will lose that election. Who's going to win? I think it's the reform stream that is rising up in the Palestinian society. Young generation that believes in accountability, transparency, in democracy, believes that there should be new dynamics in this conflict, believes that we need to manage our relation in a different way with the Israelis, believes that we can gradually reach to a political horizon if we start gaining the trust of the Israelis and gaining the respect of the Palestinians. I've heard something very weird from the most recently appointed deputy president for Abbas, Hussein Sheikh, who is trying to market himself as part of the change in power in the PA. When he met 2 different Israeli delegations, he said, and he is the most unpopular person in the PA. He's the most hated Palestinian political figure in the PA, and he was appointed by Abbas as deputy, as if this is some kind of a change in the regime. He said to 2 American delegations, currently we need to take unpopular decisions, including cutting the salaries of the prisoners and changing the Palestinian curriculum. And these unpopular decisions need unpopular leaders like me. That's why you need to continue supporting me. And this is nonsense, because unpopular decisions need very popular leaders that make these decisions popular. If I will not convince the Palestinians and the Palestinian society in whole that we get nothing from the incitement in our curriculum, that the values of tolerance will help us think better, behave better, and get better results from Israelis, then I can change the books, but I cannot change the classroom discussions. So the change need to come by courageous, popular leaders that are not afraid and they don't have any hesitation and they have the guts and the volcano in their hearts to have the chance to rebirth the Palestinian people. Because you cannot bluff the Israelis. There is a mistrust, a serious mistrust. We lost the Israeli peace camp in the second intifada. We lost completely any hope inside the Israeli society after the 7th of October. To regain this trust, we need a massive earthquake change in the Palestinian side. And the Israelis need to see it and witness it and believe in it. So it needs that kind of leadership. And I am 100% confident that this kind of political movement will win the coming elections, will defeat Hamas and will defeat Abbas. And from this kind of political movement will come a Palestinian Ben Gurion that maybe he will be able to activate the Altelena option against whoever will resist the kind of change that we want from Hamas. From Hamas, there are still a group of militia power in Gaza that they are not convinced they have been defeated, that they don't want to deliver their arms. If we don't activate our own Altelena option with them, we will continue to be a group of militias and we will never be able to be transferred into statehood and act like states should act. So this kind of possibility of having and forcing elections over Abbas does not have a lot of support from the United States and Israel. It has some kind of support from Europe. Europe are trying to push it. The Americans and Israelis are hesitating. They don't want to get this risk. They think that Hamas might still win that elections. Let me tell you something. I can convince anybody who would like seriously to discuss the coming elections that we can win these elections because simply I know the people that they are fed up from the option of Hamas and Abbas. And I know if you come with a proper vision and strategy, people will sign for it. But also I know that today you don't win elections, you buy elections. If you have a better budget, a bigger budget than everybody else, you win that election. What could be the budget of Hamas in that election? We put 10 times budget and we can win it. And let us say by worst case scenario that Hamas will win again. Okay, you don't need to recognize the result of elections as Americans and Israelis. And then we, the Palestinians, can pay the consequences of this choice because we have chosen. Now, today, we are paying the consequences of the regime of Hamas and Abbas out of no choice. 100 people are killed every day in Gaza without consulting with them if Hamas represents them or not. Hamas on the 7th of October took 2.3 million Palestinians in a collective suicide attack against Israel without consulting with them, without having the agency to decide this destiny that they are facing now. The whole Gaza was erased from the map. And nobody gave Hamas that agency. An election in 2007 that they hardly won with 40% of the votes kept them in power until today, until they committed the 7th of October. If we had had our elections in 2021, we could have avoided the 7th of October. So I think it's a must. It's the cornerstone of a change. Nothing will happen if we don't have a Palestinian election, a change in leadership that comes before the Israeli elections, and then the Israeli elections will result in a different kind of government in Israel.
So Samer, thanks. I do want to get back to the question you asked for some sense of optimism, and maybe I don't want to lead your answer, so you can ignore this lead if you want. But you mentioned how Israel is sort of able to very easily wipe away or ignore the pressure coming from Europe, at least for now. We'll see how much that, if that changes over time. But when it comes from the UAE, for example, I think for a long time, even from supporters of the Abraham Accords, there's been a sense of somewhat, I would say, disappointment with the fact that maybe the UAE never really found the right voice in terms of explaining to Israelis what the expectations were. Of course, we know that there's that quid pro quo that they should not annex the West Bank in exchange for the recognition. That was never officially part of the agreement, though, of course. It was just a sort of general understanding. But it's taken this long, really, to see the UAE in some ways put their foot down. I think this is the first time, really, since the Abraham Accords. Is there something there? Is there a silver lining there?
Yeah. No, I think there are a few, just because we want to be optimistic. I mean, I think summer is a blast of optimism always. So I'll give you my view. So for the first of all, I mean, Israelis, for the most part, right, even though most people were not supporters of the government, country was doing fairly well, GDP higher than that of France. You can just go have your latte, Pilates class in the morning, continue living your life. And I think what October 7 brought, and October 7 before the judicial reform coup, but also the failure of the Israeli government to handle everything after October 7, right? I'm not saying the military front, like domestically in Israel, people are not getting what they need, the services, and it goes to the people of the north and the people around Gaza. So it creates an awakening. You have new actors. We keep talking about Victor Lieberman and Benjamin Gantz and stuff, but who knows in the next elections, right? You can have other people. There's the fourth quarter and the reservist and Jonathan Shimris, who is the brother of one of the hostages that was shot by the IDF as they were trying to, right, in Gaza. They remember the IDF shot 3 hostages that were with their trying to raise their hand. So his brother is someone. So I think that's a positive, that Israelis also realize that they need a new leadership. Another one is what Jonathan spoke about, is this idea of the region. It's both the leverage that can come from the UN. Interestingly, I was here in Washington. I think it was the late September 2023, so right before October 7, and I moderated a conversation with Yusuf Otaiba, the UAE ambassador to Washington. And I asked him something about their point about Israeli policies and their leverage. And he said, we don't have leverage. Our deal was 3 or 4 years. Abraham Accords, 3 years. We can't do anything. Even if we want to, we can't say anything. Well, they kind of did something just now, which is telling. But not just on that. If you see from an Israeli perspective, today the Arab countries are willing to share the burden and help recover Gaza in ways that they have never been willing to do. Right? Sadat, the Jewish president, when they negotiated the fate of Gaza, right? He wanted the whole territory, wouldn't give up an inch of the Sinai Peninsula, but Gaza was like, keep it to yourself. I don't want that. The Jordanians didn't want that. And from people from Egypt, right? This is like the Egyptians don't like giving up territory. But Gaza, take it. You have had all the Arab countries basically ignore what was happening there. And all of a sudden they're saying, no, we will help you, not just with money and reconstruction. We're willing to do a lot of things to make sure that the fate of Gaza doesn't repeat. So this is important. Israel just looks at the negative stuff that's coming from the UN, but the New York Declaration from July had very important language about Hamas not being able to be part of the Palestinian political system forever. This is important. It's not just important for Israelis, really. It's important for Palestinians, as Summer said. This is not a leadership that dignifies them, right, either. And they need something else. So I think these things are important. And the idea that it's not just whether the Palestinians are going to bring us peace with the Arab world, or the Arab world is going to just make sure the Palestinians come. It's sort of like a zipper approach. You have to have both. And we're all in this together, because frankly, whether MBS wants his AI thing and MBZ was another thing, and right, like, the fact is that it's an issue, and it continues to derail their vision for a peaceful region. And the final one I will say, and this sort of like throws back the ball to Summer, as observer of this and someone who works on this analytically, the Palestinians have had two leaderships for a long time, right? There was the Hamas leadership that for a long time could argue to the Palestinians that they brought sovereignty over land. There were no IDF raids into Gaza, except when there was a conflict. They had international border crossings. They did. They had prisoners come back occasionally, right? They brought the results, and you had Abu Mazen that, with his strategy, brought nothing, right? Basically, for the Palestinian people, brought nothing. And this moment in time does create an opportunity for the Palestinian to reclaim the Palestinian nationalism, and hopefully bring the Israelis on board in the way that Summer said. And this church starts with a different narrative, but it's frankly also having a Palestinian responsible entity next door. All along, while I'm hoping that Israel will not turn into an irresponsible entity on the other side.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah, understatement.
From the audience, please, any questions? If people are, yeah, please.
My question is actually, okay, it's a bit complicated. I'm not sure why we're diving a lot deeper into the elections for the Palestinian people, whether it's the PA or Hamas, when they have shown over time that they were controlled by the Israeli government. I mean, PA has not been able to take care of their economy, whether in the West Bank or just general, overall Palestine, for so long. And I mean, in the last 2 months or 3, their money has been held by the Israeli government. They're not allowed to even pay their workers or anyone like that. So while we're talking about the ability for Palestinian people to have their own government that will eventually represent them, they are not, the government cannot even stand against those that are trying, to take over. So what's the point of having that sort of government when where it matters, it wouldn't even be able to protect its own people?
Yeah, there's no question that the fact that the Palestinian Authority has no capacity has a lot to do with the Israeli policy. The idea of the tax revenue funds that Israel collects is part of the Oslo Accords. That Israel collects the tax revenue to bring them. There's actually Israel is willing to hand over some of these payments, but they're deducting what they consider as terror financing money. By the way, started in Washington. Israel copied the legislation, but the PA said no, we refuse to get that part. The other measures that we spoke about, curtailment of all, freedom of access and movement and other things. So a lot of it is the Israeli policy. And frankly, a lot of it is in the hands of Bezalel Smotrich as a minister of finance and a minister in the defense ministry. But it's not an excuse. He has a prime minister above him that supposedly could steer in a different direction if they wanted. But this is something that is not something that most of the Israelis see. Is that all of a sudden you hear, from time to time, it's reflected as the economic situation in the West Bank is bad. Some of these issues have to do with just legal issues, right? Until the PA does what they call the martyr payment reform, they can't. Israel, according to law, and by the way, it's the same law in the U.S., cannot transfer the payments. They are doing a change. They are conducting a change now, but no one is sending missions to actually examine if they're abiding by it. So I agree with you. I see less of sovereignty and less of a state in the state of Palestine, which is why I think it's so ridiculous that France and Belgium and Canada and Australia are going to recognize the state of Palestine, right? As we're seeing, instead of working with the parties on these actual things that have to happen, so they get more freedom. The elections is I think is a different story, right? This is more for Summer, the elections issue. By the way, I'll just say on the elections, which is in May 2021, before Guardian of the Walls. No, it was in 2021. There was Abu Mazen declared elections. There was a lot of talk. Should elections happen? Should elections not happen? And eventually, he said that Israel doesn't allow him to hold elections because they're not allowing the Palestinians to vote, the Palestinians of East Jerusalem to vote. Now, historically, the Palestinians of East Jerusalem, how many voted for the PA? It's like nothing, low percentages. And this would happen in a year, it's 2020. How many people here voted by mail? We even wanted to use your old office as a voting station. We thought about, voting in by mail, busing them around. He used this as an excuse not to have elections. And this is, I know also, by the way, from conversation with the IDF. So the IDF was like happy to tell him they're not allowing him to have the elections because he didn't want the elections, because he knew that he would lose. Right, Sandra?
Right. Well, I need to say something about the question of Sam. The offers that we have received from Ehud Olmert and others. Yes, Ehud Olmert offered the Palestinian the maximum we can get. If a full independent sovereign Palestinian state on over 94% of the West Bank and Gaza, with the Palestinian neighborhoods in Jerusalem as capital of Palestine, the Jewish neighborhoods in Jerusalem as capital of Israel. There is no flag over the old city managed by a committee of 5 countries. It's almost there. Everything was there. And he missed that opportunity, Abbas. So this brings us to the last question. It's not always, yes, Israel is the occupying power, and Israel is doing terrible things. And I can lecture you for hours and hours about a list of war crimes and the misuse of or the ignorance of international law or whatever you want. But as a Palestinian politician, I need to be adult and talk a little bit about what we are missing to do. There is some kind of responsibility. If a leader of the Palestinians, like Abbas, and by the way, we have been led only by 3 different leaders in the last 100 years. Sheikh Amin Husseini, then Yasser Arafat, and then Mahmoud Abbas. 3 leaders. Everything that went wrong, all the bad decisions that were taken by the Palestinian people were taken by these 3 people. Nobody consulted with us on a democratic way, on very strategic decisions like not seizing the opportunity of Ehud Olmert's plan. Now, the question, if I am a Palestinian leader for 20 years, like Abbas, since 2005, if I have been doing business with 8 Israeli prime ministers out of 14 in the history of Israel, from Rabin to Bibi, if I have been doing business with 6 different American presidents, from Clinton until Trump, if I've been doing business with 3 different Saudi kings and 2 different Jordanian kings and 3 different Egyptian presidents, with all these people, I couldn't succeed in changing the reality of Palestinians. I cannot say that they are not enabling me. It means I am not able to find a way. We need to try something else. Of course, the Israelis voluntarily will not give us anything if they stay in their comfort zone. The question, how can I engineer something that moves the Israelis towards something useful? There is something that we can do and we are not doing. Abbas is on the silent move. All what he does is the 30 minutes speech in the podium of the United Nations General Assembly every year. A lousy one. Thanks to those who denied his access to the United Nations, he was getting a delegation of 80 officials to the United Nations to give a speech. 80 officials could have costed us $3 million that trip to the United Nations. At the time that all the PA employees, the 250,000 employees of the PA, are not receiving their salaries for at least 6 months. At the time that 1.2 million kids in Gaza don't have drinkable water. Do you think that this is a leadership that is doing maximum effort? This is my question. Are we as Palestinians doing maximum efforts? Of course, Israelis are guilty of everything you have in your mind. But the current leadership is not showing sense of responsibility. They need to find a way. If he's not able to find a way, he should go home at the age of 90 and allow a younger generation to do the job.
All right. right. Well, thank you, Summer. I think maybe that's again the challenge, the most challenging question of the day was to give a sense of optimism. I don't think to just be realistic that that's entirely possible in this situation. Of course, it's a terrible situation. It's the understatement, of the decade, I think. But I think that you've given us all incredible food for thought. And we understand that there are, beyond the immediate conflict, which has claimed so many lives and continues to cause such hardship, there are serious problems in the two-body politics inside Israel and in Palestine, in the sense of dealing with extremists, dealing with the extremist narrative, and how we overcome them. I'm not sure we have all the answers given to us today, but I'm incredibly grateful to you, Samer, and to you, Shira, for helping us think all of this through and maybe appreciating the enormity of the situation, which both of you have to face when you go back home. Samer, you're home, and of course we understand the implications of policies being generated in this town that are not necessarily so helpful for helping us find some optimism to grab to. So with that, if you'll allow me to close, unless you have some final words, no. I thank you all for joining. Please do grab whatever's left over from food or drink on your way out, and please join us. We'll have a discussion later in the week with the former editor of the Jerusalem Post, Yaakov Katz, who will be giving us a very different point of view, I think, on some of these issues. But he'll be talking about his book that recently published called "While Israel Slept," talking more about the military failure of October 7th. And again, we have many more events scheduled for this semester. So please do join us.